This series may be called Flight Numbers Don't Matter, but there are actually some flight numbers that you can usually trust. For example, discs that say they're really overstable or super understable typically are, at least more than most. But there are some flight numbers that are quite confusing, and we'll be tackling one of those slots today. Hey everyone, it's Greg from Six Sided Discs, and before we talk about some mid-ranges, a quick announcement. SixSidedDiscs.com will be closed from Wednesday, July 29th through August 15th, while we are at not one, but two Disc Golf Pro Tour events. That's right, you can find us at Ledgestone for both fly marts in downtown Morton, Illinois on Friday and Saturday, July 31st and August 1st. And we're also excited to be heading out for the first time to Des Moines, Iowa, so we can set up a booth at the Discmania Challenge. And at both events, we are bringing some pretty cool stuff. First, we have these brand new swirly hexagons, which will be available online later this year. They'll debut at Ledgestone and the Discmania Challenge in a couple different colors. Plus, we have tons of new mini hexagons, Trash Panda Minis with our stamp, our new Six-Sided Discs custom mitten bags, and two exciting additions that should arrive in time, our brand new Six-Sided Discs hats from Circle One in two different colors, and finally our 2026 jersey from Disc Golf Threads. We are super excited with how all of these turned out, and we can't wait to show them to you. But there is another thing. The day before the Discmania Challenge is the Creator Challenge. It's a fun pro-am doubles event with all your favorite content creators and pros, and I am beyond excited to announce that I am not playing in it. Yep, you heard that right, because at nearly 40 years old, I'm going to get crushed by the other content creators, never mind the pros. But I am very excited to announce that I will be teaming up with Terry Miller as one of the on-course commentators for the Disc Golf Network. I am very excited, a little bit nervous, so please wish me luck and watch live on YouTube or the Disc Golf Network on Thursday, August 6th at 6 p.m. local time. And keep an eye out for a video on our channel all about my experience, hopefully later next month. Oh, and I almost forgot to tell you that we have this year's free subscriber Velcro patch, the Hexagon Patch. If you see us at any of the 5 big events that we're attending this year, just say hello, show us you're subscribed, and get your patch. It is that simple. Wow, that was a lot of announcements. Anyways, let's get back to flight numbers not mattering with some 0 turn and 2 fade mid-ranges. One of the reasons I singled out this slot to explore in more detail is because it's a slot that is growing rapidly. In fact, the majority of the 16 mid-ranges we're looking at today were released in the last 5 years. What is it exactly that's driving the popularity of this slot? Well, it may not necessarily be pros. Gannon Buhr has gone on record as saying that most mid-ranges are basically pointless on the Disc Golf Pro Tour. And if it's not pros that are driving these sales, I have a theory to submit as the root cause. You. More and more casual amateur players, presumably some of you watching, have been picking up on the fact that 14-speed distance drivers aren't for everybody, and that many of you can get nearly as much distance with a lot more control from a mid-range. And what gives you the most control out of any other type of disc? Well, one that has just the right amount of overstability. But which 0 turn and 2 fade mid-range has the right amount for you? Well, let's find out, because as I said, we've assembled over a dozen 0-2-ish mid-ranges to choose from to see how they all compare. And as we go, we'll compare and assemble them onto our handy-dandy graph right here. So let's dive in with one of the newest, the recently released GAD. The GAD is a new overstable mid-range from Swedish manufacturer Kastaplast. And I'm almost certainly mispronouncing it because at this point, I don't know that I've ever pronounced a Swedish disc correctly. The GAD is rated at 5502, and it's a really interesting mid-range because for Kastaplast, it represents a slow shift from funky prototype company to more mainstream appeal. The closest thing Kastaplast used to have to an overstable mid-range was the Kax or the Kax Z, rated at 6403 and 6502 respectively. Both were arguably more fairway driver than mid-range, but they were called mid-ranges by Kastaplast, and that gave them this little bit of an identity crisis. Players were unsure whether to use the Kax Z as an alternative to a 5-speed mid-range or a 7-speed fairway. Or both, or neither, and ultimately, Kastaplast discontinued the Kax Z. The GAD is more what players would expect. It's a smaller 5-speed rim on a wide diameter mid-range, and this is what most players are used to from this type of disc. But will it have any sting? Which is apparently what the name means. Well, off the tee it certainly does. The GAD was exactly what I would expect from a 0-turn, 2-fade type of mid-range. It has no turn, it has quite a bit of fade. 0-2 makes sense to me. Now again, to try and visualize the difference between the GAD and the rest of the mid-ranges we have today, we're going to use our graph. At the center point from top to bottom is the average distance traveled, while the center point from left to right would be what we considered straight. And the GAD was certainly not straight. And that would put it right around over here. Next, let's see another newer mid-range, the Taco from Mint Discs. The Taco's design is quite a bit different to the GAD. While the GAD has the tiniest little micro bead, the Taco is a big bead mid-range, but it has a smaller diameter than the GAD, so it feels a little bit different in your hand. It also has a more dramatic concave shape to the rim, but it feels excellent. Now, if you don't already know, most of Mint discs are made by MVP, including the Taco. But what's interesting about that arrangement is MVP also makes discs for several other companies, including ThoughtSpace Athletics. And ThoughtSpace has a mid-range that fits into this category as well, the Crux. It's rated at 5.402, as opposed to the Taco's 5.502, and it's also a smaller diameter, big bead, concave shape that feels great in the hand. Wait a minute. Taco, Crux, Taco, Crux. These are literally the exact same disc. And check this out, they fly the same too. The Taco and the Crux are plenty overstable, maybe even a little bit more so than the GAD, so take your pick. They both feel nice, they're beefy, they fit right around here on our graph. So that's 3 mid-ranges down, 3 pretty much close to what we would expect for 0-turn and 2-fade, but will that trend continue? Probably not now that I've asked the question, but let's see if the Doomsday Scope fits the bill. One thing that the Doomsday Scope doesn't do is fit expectations. It is just nothing like any mid-range that we've already seen, nor is it like any mid-range we will see later. And while it may not be what we expect from a 0-turn, 2-fade mid-range in terms of design, it is pretty much what we would expect from Doomsday discs. Doomsday is all about being different. They make numerous unapproved discs, including multiple non-circular discs, and even their approved discs defy convention when it comes to their wing shapes and designs. The Scope is so unconventional that if you can find a disc out there in the disc golf world with the same wing design, I want you to email a picture of that disc to sixsideddiscs@gmail.com, tell me about it, and the first one to do so can have the Scope that we're testing today. Alright, so despite the strange design, does the Scope fly anything like our other mid-ranges? Well, not here. And not here either, because today the Scope, for Josh at least, was super understable. And maybe that's because Josh averages around 58 miles an hour at over 1200 RPM on his backhand. Or maybe it's because the Scope's slightly softer plastic is warping and making it harder to get a clean release or easier to turn over. Hard to say, but it was super understable for Josh, and that puts it way over here. But let's see if a couple other mid-ranges can get us back on track. Beginning with this, the Discmania Glacier. Designed by Gannon Buhr, the Glacier is a fast, torque-resistant, overstable mid. At least, that's what Discmania says. The shape is unlike the others we've seen so far. No bead, no sharp edges, just smooth mid-rangedness. And on the course, it's also smoothly overstable. And Glacier definitely gets us back on track. It shows this reliable fade on multiple shots, but it wasn't quite as beefy as the Taco or the Crux. It also feels like it has just a little bit more glide and forward push to it as well, and that's going to put it right around here. Another newer mid-range in this category is the Climo Discs Bel Air. Now, if you know anything about Ken Climo, it's that he was all about the rock back in the day with Innova, so it's hardly surprising that they dropped a rock-inspired mid-range in his line of discs. It's got a similar wide diameter, a similar concave wing and big bead, again, just like the rock, The Bel Air, though, unlike most Rocs and Roc 3s, actually has quite a bit of overstability. Because on multiple occasions for us today, it flew just like this. Nice and beefy. At least as overstable as the Glacier was, maybe not quite flying as far, it lands right here. Now the Climo line is made by Discraft, and so is this. This is the Wasp. In fact, at first glance, they look really similar. I mean, look at these wings side by side. The big difference though here is that the Wasp is in Jawbreaker plastic. And well, the plastic is in the details, because this Wasp was anything but overstable. On every throw, it just drifted and drifted and drifted to the right, barely fading forward at the end of its flight. And that means that it has to go right around here today on our graph, but take that with a grain of salt, because I'm pretty sure the Wasp in a premium plastic would at least be a little straighter, maybe even overstable. Let's shift gears though from Discraft to Innova with the Shark. Now you might be surprised that we're testing out the Shark today when we just talked about Innova's Roc and Roc 3 alongside the Bel Air. But we've covered the Roc and Roc 3 many times on our channel, and it has been well established that despite having flight numbers ending with 03, they're both quite a lot straighter. And since Innova makes a mid-range with 0 turn and 2 fade, the Shark was the natural choice. Many people describe the Shark as a beginner-friendly mid-range, which is interesting considering how overstable other 02 mid-ranges were today. But I guess I can see why, because for Josh, it's not very 02 at all. In fact, for Josh, it was quite understable. I think one of the other reasons the Shark is favored for beginners is that it's often available in DX plastic and put into beginner packs. And in DX plastic, a much more understable plastic, it would be quite beginner-friendly. Probably a lot more beginner-friendly than the Star plastic we threw today, because today, the Shark lands right here. Let's continue our comparison of 0 turn and 2 fade mid-ranges with these two, the Archive from Prodigy and the EMAC Truth from Dynamic Discs. Now at first glance, you may be a bit confused why we've paired these two together. They don't have particularly similar designs. One is a wide diameter, one is a lot chunkier than the other, but they both possess something that often doesn't get talked about very much, especially in the world of flight numbers: glide. Now we're kicking around some ideas for what a glide specific video might look like, but in the meantime, let's talk about what glide is. Glide is defined as the tendency for a disc to stay aloft during flight. Essentially, how well does that disc channel air over the top and push down off the edge to generate lift? And it's quite hard to measure, but sometimes you just know it when you see it. And these two have it. First, the Archive, and there's no denying that it isn't quite as overstable as the first few mid-ranges we saw today, but it is just staying in the air for so long. It glides and glides and glides. And the EMAC Truth was no different. Similarly, it did eventually find fade towards the end of its flight, but not before flying at least 50 feet farther than most of these overstable mid-ranges we saw today. Both were technically overstable, but that extra glide is going to put them way up here on our graph. Now, nearly every mid-range we chose today was a 5-speed, for a reason, but how much difference would we see if we dropped down to, say, a 4-speed? Well, apparently, a lot. Here we have the Lone Star Harpoon and the Trash Panda Canyon, both rated at 4302, and right off the bat, they look very different to the 5-speeds that we've seen today. Many of the 5-speeds are chunky, wide-diameter mid-ranges, and they're big. But the Harpoon and Canyon are flat-top discs, more like traditional approach discs, as many 4-speeds technically are, but not every flat-top overstable-looking 4-speed is created equal. Because Josh really struggled with the Harpoon today. He said it was so shallow that he couldn't really get consistent releases. It would sometimes just drop or fall out of his hand. Other times it would easily turn over, and eventually he was able to get enough air under it that it could fly a halfway decent flight. That inconsistency, however, was nowhere to be found with Trash Panda's new stock Canyon plastic. It's a slightly stiffer, tackier blend than previous runs, and the Canyon was really nice and beefy, as most approach-style mid-ranges should be. And contrasting the extra glide that we saw from the Archive and EMAC Truth, the Canyon's flat top and beaded rim really ensured that it slows down quick and drops out of the sky for added accuracy and reliability. The Canyon lands down here in our low glide, overstable quadrant, while the Harpoon, frankly, doesn't earn a spot at all since we saw something different from it on every throw. Before we get to our last 0-2 mid-ranges, I did want to test out a couple of discs that are very nearly 0-2, but just have slightly different numbers. So let's take a look at the Westside Vellamo and the Axiom Pyro. Rated at 5501.5, the Vellamo is rated to be slightly more straight than the rest of our lineup today. And the design is similarly rounded to the Discmania Glacier that we saw earlier, but it's nice and domey and chunky, much like the Prodigy Archive. And with those characteristics and those flight numbers, it's perhaps no surprise to see it push much straighter with quite a bit of glide. On the flip side, we have the Axiom Pyro rated slightly more overstable at 5402.5. And it's been a popular choice in the MVP family for some time for reliably overstable mid-range shots, and that's probably because it is a reliably overstable mid-range that Josh found to be reliably overstable on multiple throws. Both of these felt very appropriately rated. The Vellamo was straighter than most of the discs we tested, and the Pyro as overstable, if not slightly more so, than many we tested today. But as we have tried to point out many times in this series over the years, the way that we present flight numbers here is wrong. Wrong on purpose. Firstly, you should always take flight numbers with a grain of salt, because at the end of the day, they are a marketing tool, and they can only take you so far. Because secondly, you should never use flight numbers from one company to compare directly to another company, for a whole bunch of different reasons. They should really only be used as a comparison tool within a single brand. As soon as you start comparing flight numbers from one company to another, you're getting numbers chosen by different people for different reasons, by different methods of determining what those numbers should be. Case in point, our last two discs, the Meridian Ravine and the Westside Pine. Rated at 5502 and 5402 respectively, the Ravine and Pine have nearly the same flight numbers. And using only the flight numbers, you would probably expect them to fly nearly identically. But as we often find out here on our channel, the reality of those flight numbers is much more complex and more nuanced. You see, the Pine is a chunky, domey mid-range, just slightly less aerodynamic than the Vellamo from Westside we saw a moment ago. On the flip side, the Ravine is a stiff, flat-topped mid-range that looks more like a cross between a Discmania MD3 and a Buzz OS. And wouldn't you know it, the Pine flies a lot straighter, with a bit more glide. While the Ravine is quite overstable, with a lot less glide. So despite their flight numbers, they land quite far apart on our graph today. Flight numbers don't matter. The name of this series is meant to get your attention, but not because it's some complex disc golf rage bait, but because it's true. The way that most people go about using flight numbers can really easily lead them astray and lead to frustration when you're shopping for and looking for new discs. The way that most people think about and use flight numbers means that they often don't matter. But if you pay close attention to the design of a disc, if you pay close attention to the marketing and the way that it's tested and presented by a company, you can learn a lot about how a disc is really likely to fly for you. And hopefully after testing and comparing and plotting these particular mid-ranges today on our graph, you learned a little bit about how these ones might fly for you. What are your favorite mid-ranges with 0 turn and 2 fade, and how do they fly for you? Let us know in the comments below. And also comment below if you're going to come see us at Ledgestone or the Discmania Challenge. We can't wait to see you out there and give you your Velcro patch. Remember, we have a limited supply of patches for each event, so come see us early before we run out. For Six Sided Discs, I'm Greg, and I'm going to be on the Disc Golf Network. How cool is that? We'll see you there, and we'll see you in the next one. Let's shift gears though from Innova. Nope. Remember, we have a limited supply of patches. Short runner, come on. You got this, brother.
Why?
Ready. Taco. It's raining tacos from out of the sky. Tacos. If you like this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video, subscribing to our channel, or becoming a member. Your support makes this content possible.